Afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to our session, Transforming Onboarding with Win365 and Viva. My name is Dan Ramacati, and today I'm joined by a few folks here that'll introduce themselves.
Good morning, everybody. My name is AJ Goldie. I'm a cloud endpoint technical specialist here at Microsoft, and I specifically cover providers in the healthcare space. Jen?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenn Myers. I work with employee experience with healthcare organizations across the U.S. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. Over to you, Tom.
Good morning, everybody. Tom Cantrell. I'm Enterprise Collaboration Practice Lead at Kaizen. Nice to be here with you all, and I'll just call out a teammate who's with me. I'll introduce her, Jenn Browning. She's a principal consultant on my team here to help talk us through Viva today.
All right, thank you. So what is your onboarding experience like? I wanted to share a little bit of my onboarding experience when I joined rejoined Microsoft back on March 1st, 2020. My first day back, I had to fly to Fargo, which was about 675 miles away from St. Louis, and then spend the day in Fargo through some onboarding, which was a really great experience. I did enjoy meeting everybody, but all of that was required just to get my laptop and my user ID. I flew back to St. Louis on March 2nd, another 675 miles, arrived home at about 11 p.m. at night, and then started again the next day for actually my real experience as an employee after that experience. So now I'll hand it over to Jenn.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your story and your context on, just your first day at Microsoft. It's kind of an interesting story, right? Kind of painful. I think we all have our own versions and stories of being a new hire and what that experience looked like. I think a couple of things to note, what are some of the costs outside of just the experience for each of us individually? Like, what is the cost to the organization when we don't have the best onboarding experience? And for that, we looked at some research. So a couple research articles from Harvard Business Review and Wired recently. The Harvard Business Review was kind of interesting, and it looked at some of the stats of what happens when, onboarding doesn't go so great. Some of those stats are that 52% of new hires are satisfied, and which is kind of concerning. That half of those newly hired employees are planning to leave the job soon, but that number actually goes up to 80% if we don't feel like we have the right training and are ready to take on the new responsibility. So another kind of concerning statistic. But that is only compounded if you consider this little thing called AI that's come out, and just the velocity of change that it's bringing. Kind of an interesting, perspective from Wired that, the skills have changed by 25% since 2015, but that is actually expected to go up by 65% by 2030. So, the cost of poor onboarding and not having the training and skilling really is to our talent and making sure that we're retaining those people. So, some really interesting perspectives from us. So after, Dan's experience, we learned from that, luckily. Not that we're perfect in onboarding, but we kind of chronicled our journey and, how do we fix it? And especially during a hybrid world, back in, 2020, when pretty much work just went home. What did we find? We kind of studied ourselves to see what was working and what wasn't. Maybe one of those things was sending people to Fargo, Dan, to get their equipment to start. But a couple of interesting, perspectives in this, and that is that, connection and collaboration really matter in those first few days. One of the things that we saw was that if managers intentionally were meeting with their new employees more regularly in those first 90 days, that they were 3.5 times more satisfied with their onboarding experience, which meant that they stayed. We know connection matters and learning and those onboarding buddies. So, when we assign that person that's been with the organization a while with the new person, having that buddy and that experience and that connection really helps to accelerate it. But the third thing is really what we found is, how do you create great experiences? And great experiences really need great collaboration. They need, access to the content and information to do our jobs. There's quite a bit that's involved in that. And Tom, our partner Tom from Kaizen, is going to talk a little bit about what they've been doing and how they've been helping organizations achieve that great experience. So Tom, over to you.
Thanks, Jen. So let's talk a little bit about what a typical first day looks like, and we're gonna tell this story through the lens of a persona, Christy, who's a clinician that's been hired in a healthcare setting. So it's her first day of work. She's got a lot on her plate. So the question is, how do we help her connect to her teammates and her manager so that she can better understand their expectations and better understand the purpose and impact of her role so she can start to contribute sooner rather than later? How do we surface information that gives her a better sense of the culture and values of the organization so she can get a better understanding of where she fits in? And when she gets stuck, how's she going to know who to turn to for help? These are some of the highlights of the important activities and the meaningful experiences that new employees encounter on their first few days of work. But there are other activities that really aren't so meaningful in and of themselves. And I've got logged in kind of pulled up here. That's really not so meaningful. I mean, I personally have never had a meaningful login experience. Could be doing it wrong, but we all got to do it. And sometimes it's those simple processes that can be frustrating and detract from the real purpose and meaning of the things that we'd like to be doing on our first few days of work. So let's take a look at some of the typical blockers that we see. Aside from logging in, once you are logged in, where do you click next? Where do you go to ask for help? Do you have to navigate multiple platforms just to complete a single task? Our new employees require to spend a lot of time and energy searching for information and then getting frustrated when they don't find it. These are some of the problems that Microsoft 365 and the Viva platform can solve by making all of this information readily available based on someone's identity right after they log in. And Windows 365 can make getting access to a desktop and logging in much, much simpler. I've got a demo kind of queued up here, a recording. I'm going to hit play so we can kind of walk through what some of these features and functionalities look at. So I'm going to hit play. And if you all give me a thumbs up when you hear it, that'd be appreciated. Here we go. So that was a lightning round through just a couple of the features of and capabilities of Viva and the employee experience platform. Hopefully you get a sense of how it can support a more meaningful employee onboarding process. I think it's important to say, too, that the value and impact goes far beyond just the onboarding experience. And there's a lot more to talk about across the Viva platform with features like or modules like Viva Insights, which emphasize employee well-being and positive work habits, Pulse and Glint that can help capture employee feedback and sentiment with surveys, and Viva Goals to help align organizational strategy and purpose from leadership all the way down to individual contributors. And that's not even to mention AI and the new features coming out with Copilot. So happy to take questions, but I'm going to pass this over to you now, AJ.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I think what is really resonating too with the demo that Tom just shared was how you get to Viva and how you get to those resources to begin with, right? At the start of his demo, he was accessing what's called a Windows 365 cloud PC. And it's funny because it takes up such a small amount of that demo, but that's because it's just second nature and such an easy process to do. In fact, on the slide we're looking at here in that middle laptop, that's the screen in which Tom was accessing his cloud PC from. And this is what end users would have access to as well. And the great thing too is for contractors, for example, they have access to multiple PCs on that cloud PC instance or in that Windows app. So a little bit about Windows 365. It's a subscription-based cloud PC service. It provides a remote Windows desktop experience. It's accessible on any modern device. So whether it's a Windows PC, laptop, desktop, tablet, could be an iPad, could be a Mac, any modern device has access to a cloud PC. And the idea is that you're now allowing your users to install Windows software, access Viva, like Tom showed, access any other onboarding content that they may need. You have access to all of the applications necessary so your end users can start working instantaneously. A little bit more about Windows 365 is that you can obviously be more productive on any device, which I mentioned. So you're now allowing more versatility with your employees where they can actually work from anywhere as long as they have internet. And you can deliver these reliable, scalable, and secure experiences to these users that's all supported by the Microsoft Cloud. So ultimately, this is going to foster a better employee engagement, satisfaction, and a better experience as well. And then, like I mentioned, it's secure by design. So as long as it's supported by the Microsoft Cloud, you're going to be able to mitigate risks, data leaks. You can ensure that your business is going to have full continuity as well. And then managing more with less, right? We all know how hard it can be to facilitate and manage these onboarding experiences. And the idea here is that it's basically click to deploy. So these administrators in IT are going to love this platform. End users have instantaneous access to these devices, or these cloud PCs, I should say, and it allows HR to onboard employees far quicker than having to ship physical equipment. All right, and what we're talking about here is how users and IT love Windows 365. So we aim to make Windows 365 loved by users and trusted by IT, most importantly. So that allows us to deliver that simplicity, that versatility, and all the security needed to enable these users. So for example, like I mentioned, these users are now going to have the ability to boot instantaneously to their cloud PCs and stream the entire Windows experience and have access to all of those applications, the content, settings, anything they need to get properly onboarded. And that Windows 365 cloud PC experience will travel anywhere that employee is, right? Because you can access that cloud PC on virtually any device. Excuse me. And then as far as IT goes, right, we obviously have to work hand in hand with IT. And you want to do anything you can to make an ally with IT to make your onboarding processes far quicker than it traditionally would when you're having to procure that physical hardware. So from an IT perspective, Windows 365 is going to offer multiple configurations, so you can customize the RAM, the processor, the storage sizes, and it's fully scalable. And again, it's virtually click to deploy. From a Windows 365 perspective, like I said, you're going to be able to simplify that procurement, that deployment, so you don't have to worry about dealing with vendors to source hardware and bring it to IT to image it and deploy it, or even bring in employees like Dan from across the country to pick up their physical equipment, because now you're able to do this all virtually, right? And finally, and very importantly, Windows 365 is secure by design. So it's built with those principles of zero trust, and Windows 365 is going to be able to secure and store all the information in that Microsoft cloud. So it's not on that physical device. So it'll be far more secure. And then these end users are going to be able to have full productivity day zero, really. So these Windows 365 cloud PCs are always up to date. They're building on the full strength of Microsoft security principles and baselines. And the end of the story here is that you're going to be able to get your new hires onboarded far quicker than you would using the traditional methods of procuring physical hardware and configuring physical hardware, customized and curated to these new hire employees. And I also should mention, from an offboarding perspective, while it's not as fun of a topic to discuss, you can easily deprovision these cloud PCs. So that way you don't have to worry about bringing back that hardware and having to reverse that life cycle logistics of the equipment, or worry about the legality of employees not sending equipment back. So you'll have far more control when you're doing this cloud PC deployment for new hires, contractors, or virtually anybody else at your organization. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jenn.
Thanks, AJ. Yeah, and earlier you saw Tom share a little bit about how once somebody gets their device, that they have access to everything, or access to their Windows 365 environment, how they were able to really quickly get into and see their dashboard that was tailored to them. They were one click away from getting access to some of the learning resources, another click away from getting access to being a part of their community and kind of creating that connection. And that is really the power of Viva. So what is Viva? Really, it's a digital platform that is designed to drive workforce engagement and performance. And so all of the parts that you saw really are aligned to Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Endpoint. So really bringing some of these capabilities into the flow of work. And we start with really just that, communication and connection, and helping people, connect with their leaders as well. When Tom was sharing about connecting to some of those communities, as a new employee, I can easily connect with what my leaders are saying, kind of understanding that what is the mission of the org and how do I align to it. So right away, I'm aligned to, the mission of my organization, and I'm motivated by that. And so that is part of this Viva experience. We also enable really that high performance workforce through scaling and learning. So just, creating learning pathways for me as a new employee, that I can even start my learning. If I can get access to my credentials and even begin my employee journey before I'm an employee, what a great opportunity to start my learning and start really, understanding my role, and so that I can be productive very quickly when I join. And then the last part of Viva is really around the measurement and engagement of all of this. So we have the ability to look at, sentiment and employee surveys, capturing that sentiment across the organization. We marry that with some of the behavioral and collaboration analytics that we're seeing, so that we understand, what are the ways of work happening across the organization as well. So it's an end-to-end digital experience platform that's really powered to make me as an employee more effective and productive from day one. But it also empowers our leaders to understand, that impact, and whether or not, there are new programs that are needed to help me be more effective. So really that digital end-to-end experience. And AJ, I'm going to ask you to click to the next slide. So I think a lot of people ask, well, what is the impact? So how does this really help us? And, a couple of studies that we conducted with customers in mind really showed the benefit of working with Viva. I mean, first is really this reduction in time to productivity by increasing onboarding by 50%. Really does accelerate that journey. But the other side of, how we're impacting, organizations is really around, the reduction in employee attrition. So by creating this great seamless experience, we're able to improve retention of employees. And AJ, over to you on the Windows benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot like I mentioned earlier, when we think about that traditional lifecycle management process, whether it's for existing employees or new employees, it takes time to go through the processes and procure and secure hardware and then configure it properly for those end users. And that 75%, in my opinion, could even be low, right? Because I think depending on the maturity of where a customer's IT environment is really at, it could take far longer, right? So in my opinion, even for a modern and efficient process, 75% seems relatively reasonable. But again, it could be far higher than that. So the idea, again, behind what I spoke to is being able to quickly provision and get your cloud PCs to these new hires as soon as possible, right? Whereas it could take 2 weeks plus to get an employee a device. In the instance of a Windows 365 cloud PC, it could take 15 minutes. So it's really about how quick you can get these new hires enabled. And then as far as the retention goes, right, I think we've all been in a situation where we weren't satisfied by how well we're enabled, especially when it comes to technology. And I've heard people over my career say that they were considering even leaving a company because they didn't have proper access or they were unsatisfied with their technology. So these are real statistics. This is a real problem within society and within all organizations, not just healthcare. And we want to do anything we can to make sure that we're lowering the likelihood of somebody leaving an organization based off technology as we can, since those are items that we have heavy control over. All right, I'm going to pass it back to you, Tom.
Thanks, AJ. So for those of you who are interested in taking next steps or just getting a deeper dive into what these different capabilities are for Viva and the Viva features around onboarding and beyond, or Windows 365, I've just called out a couple of workshop motions that we can go through with you to give you a better sense of what is possible. So if you are interested, typically, we as a partner have been delivering these since the inception of the product. And personally, my experience and my team's experience goes much further back in the collaborative workloads. So over the years, while we have deep technical expertise and being able to apply these technologies, we also have a team of advisors and consultants who are pro-side change management focused. So really focused on the employee experience specifically. So we bring really a blend of that expertise to these engagements. Please reach out if you're interested. Oftentimes we can start with a workshop, lead you into a pilot. But if you're interested, please reach out. I think we've got one more slide here.
Great. Thank you, Tom, AJ, Jen. What a great session. Thank you all for attending today. We do have a follow-up and survey form that you can fill out. There's a QR code, and I will post the link in the Q&A. We've also got a few minutes. If there's any questions that came up while we were talking, please feel free to ask those now. So we appreciate everyone for joining today. Thank you.
Yeah, and please be sure to check out the remainder of the blog series that we're having. So all of these webinars are going to be recorded and documented within our blog. So please be sure that you check those out too.